Peace and good, and greetings once again from the Shrine of St. Anthony here in Ellicott City, Maryland. Once again, we'd like to offer a few words, a few thoughts on this Sunday's readings, and as we have tended to be doing in recent weeks, to focus upon not the gospel, but one of the other readings. And today we have a wonderful story that we're all familiar with, I'm sure, from the book of Exodus about the people of Israel in the desert. So let's listen to the reading, and then we'll offer a few thoughts. From the book of Exodus. The whole Israelite community grumbled against Moses and Aaron. The Israelites said to them, "Would that we had died at the Lord's hand in the land of Egypt, as we sat by our flesh pots and ate our fill of bread. But you had to lead us into this desert to make the whole community die of famine." Then the Lord said to Moses, "I will now rain down bread from heaven for you. Each day the people are to go out and gather their daily portion. Thus will I test them, to see whether they follow my instructions or not. I have heard the grumbling of the Israelites. Tell them, in the evening twilight you shall eat flesh, and in the morning you shall have your fill of bread, so that you may know that I, the Lord, am your God." In the evening, quail came up and covered the camp. In the morning, a dew lay all about the camp, and when the dew evaporated, there on the surface of the desert were fine flakes like hoarfrost on the ground. On seeing it, the Israelites asked one another, "What is this?" For they did not know what it was. But Moses told them, "This is the bread that the Lord has given you to eat." In economic theory, there's often discussion about what drives markets, what drives setting prices for things. And some economists, rightly it seems, point out that there are two base is the right word, base human characteristics that drive setting prices, that drive the creation of markets for selling everything from butter to stocks to gold. And those two dynamics are fear and greed. Everything is driven by those two elements. The fear of not getting what you need, the price goes up, right? If you've got a lot of it and you want to sell it, and you think, oh, I can make a real buck on this, greed could kick in, and again, driving prices, creating markets. But markets that are driven by those two base human characteristics, fear and greed. I think that's an accurate description often of what drives human commerce. But I think that's an interesting thing for us to bring to our spiritual reflection. And I think the reading that we just heard today speaks to this, right? The Israelite people are afraid. They have fear, right? They're in the desert. There's nothing to eat. And they turn to God. And they beg God to give them food because they think back to the past when they had all the bread they could eat and all the meat they could eat back in slavery in Egypt. And God provides. But God makes a little proviso there, right? God only gives them what they need for the day, and they are only to collect as much of the manna, as much of the quail as they need for the day, right? God knows that if God gives them whatever they want, they will be greedy. They'll take more than they need. I think it's an interesting way that those two dynamics that we talked about, we can see played out in the scripture, right? And there's an important spiritual dimension, though, to this, too. We also know spiritual fear. We can know spiritual greed, if you will, right? We are called and reminded in the reading today, and in the gospel as well, right? Because it refers back to the gospel of last week of the feeding of the multitude. That God provides. God provides what we need for the moment, right? We don't need to be afraid. We shouldn't be afraid. On the other hand, we shouldn't be greedy either, spiritually greedy. God gives us what we need, not necessarily what we want. Now, that doesn't mean we don't ask God for things. We bring our intercessions to God. We ask God for all good gifts. But we should be sensitive to that, shouldn't we? Right? Not to be afraid. God gives us what we need. And not to be greedy, right? To accept what God offers, not necessarily what we want, because often those two things are different, aren't they? I'm sure we can all think of experiences in life. It's also a reminder where God lives, if you will. God lives in the present, right? Because we have a hard time focusing on that, I think, sometimes, right? We have things we remember from the past, good and bad, often bad, right? What does that lead us to? Sometimes fear, right? We think of the future. We have hopes and we have dreams for the future. That's a good thing. We are people of hope, right? But we can become obsessed with the future too. And if we get caught up in this dynamic of worrying about the future and fretting about the past, we miss the moment, because that's where God is. God does not live in time as we do. God is only in the present. And God today promises us that God will give us everything that we truly need. May God give you what you truly need, and may God give you peace.